Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker, background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike.
Hey,
how are you, sir?
Good. Probably with more energy than you are after your day.
Yes. I do not have much energy right now, but it's all good. We had a great day. For those of you that don't know, today was actually our first launch day for our church plant that I'm working with, and we actually in Central Ohio we ended up with about 60 people today, which was a great start. And for the building that we have to set everything up in, we're using a library, public library, and we have to run in and basically set up chairs and in 3 classrooms and do all of that. But the opportunity was too good to pass up, and it's a gorgeous library, gorgeous building. They just built it. And it actually has a coffee shop like right outside the classrooms. So,
Cool.
And the library staff is awesome. They love us. They came up to us today, and we're just really grateful. Like we set up, we tear down, and I'm actually in charge of safety for that. But I'm also in charge of the setup and tear down team, and so. We were able to set everything up in all 3 classrooms in about 15 minutes, which was just, it was kind of funny because everybody was like, don't get in his way. Like, don't get in James's way. Like, I'm zipping from one room to another, and I'm like, okay,
he's on a mission.
Yeah. Mission from God.
That's good. Well, it has familiarity to me. And a couple of years back when I was helping out with the church I was here in Austin, and they were set up and tear down, and they were in an event venue, but they basically had to transform it from this kind of co-working space into a church. Sure. And in a short period of time. So that afforded its own challenges, but it also was kind of a great venue to start off or as a whole, because it was kind of really cool modern building. So
yeah, this is definitely a great resource, a great modern building, and we're thankful that we're there and God provided it, and the library staff has just been amazing, and they really love us being there. And I think their comment today was, wow, you guys left this place cleaner than when you
That's
got
always
it.
Good.
Yeah,
it's always good when you get that response from the landlord.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. As always, you can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. There's some great resources there, including upcoming conferences and events. And then we also have our Church Security app, which you can download on Google Play or iOS Store. And that's at churchsecurityapp.com. And some great resources on there as well that get updated regularly for you and your team. And if you actually if you go in there, download it, register, which is all free thanks to our sponsors and donations that we receive. There are little snippets of information to help you and your team, from devotionals to practical application with training and different things like that. So fantastic resource for you. And if you, I'll do the shameless plug for the YouTube channel. If you're watching this later on YouTube, feel free to click the like and subscribe button in the lower right hand corner. That always helps us out as well. And you can be alerted to new content that comes out as we push it out. So
kind of blows me away in the sense that we have to go through that laundry list of, because we started out, it was a Facebook Live, and now it's Facebook and it's YouTube and it's all the podcasting platforms, and then it's being syndicated to the radio channel, and it just seems like it's going in so many spots now that we have to publish this. So engage across all the social media and the app too. So
for sure. So tonight this broadcast, we're going to talk about mental health and how it impacts church security, how it impacts churches, places of worship. And then also we're going to hopefully have time to touch on a little bit of how as a collective whole, we can respond to it in our community. And certainly we've seen a lot of mental health concerns coming back, with COVID disappearing and folks trying to get back to something of a level of normalcy, right? It's interesting, and I'll bring in our guest here in just a second, but we received letters today commenting, or not today, the last few days, mentioning that we were going to be back in the office soon, and for where I work. And it was really interesting because some of the dialogue with that was very specifically how to interact with people and how to do it in a professional way. And this was from our HR department, where they were saying, look, when you come back to the office, make sure that you treat people well. Don't, de-escalation, don't try and stir things up. If people choose to wear a mask, if they don't wear a mask, and just kind of going back down that. And again, we tend to be transparent on this broadcast. We tend to have a lot of fun, and this is kind of our disclaimer that we are not making light of this subject at all. And it's a very important subject that we need to embrace and talk about. So this is probably going to be one of our more serious broadcasts. But at the same time, we've had this guest on before, and you guys really liked it. Like, the response that we got from the first time that he was on was very positive, and was one of our most listened to episodes for that year. When we went back. And so that kind of told us, this is an important topic to revisit and come back to for everyone. So with that, I'm going to bring in Aaron. Aaron's with the Center for Suicide Awareness. And hello, sir. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you hanging out with us, for sure.
Of course. And for anyone watching, first and foremost, I normally would have dressed up for this. I would have at least, been a little bit more ready to go. But my wife and I and my family, we just came down with the flu like a couple of days ago. So I'm here. I'm ready to go. It's just been a rough couple of days. So I apologize for my voice and how I'm looking, but I'm here, and I'm so happy to be here. And thank you all very much for allowing me to come back.
Yeah, welcome back. And I'd say, as the vast majority of our listeners aren't actually physically seeing us anyway, so you're good.
That's good. Not that I'm in like a onesie or anything, but it's like, I definitely was like, this is gonna be rough to get through here. But no, actually today I'm on the mend, so we're good. But
that's good. Praise God.
That's good stuff. Yeah, it's every once in a while I forget that too. I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I'm not in because my usual garb is like a t-shirt and shorts. Although today it's like, single digits outside with with the cold snap that went through. I think tomorrow it's supposed to be up in the 60s, so I may be able to
Or you could just do like I do for work. It's like pajama pants on the bottom and polo shirt on top. And then it's just like, boom, there you go.
I said it's sweatpants right here. You just won't see those. But yeah,
Except
no,
you're also in Texas, Mike.
True.
So does it ever
A lot of
drop
times it's
below
shorts.
60?
It does.
hey, you want to
It's
take
above 60 now, but
take a hike up to Wisconsin and come and have this,
I was
today
born there.
Oh, okay. Well, perfect. Then you know. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, goodness.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think all of us have experienced some kind of weird weather this year. I know, like in central Ohio where I am, it's definitely been unique. I think we've gotten two snowstorms and that's it, but which is odd for us, but it is what it is. So anyhow, well, let's jump into it. So Aaron, if you don't mind, if you for folks that maybe didn't catch the last episode, just kind of walk us through your story and what you do with the Center for Suicide Awareness and how you got there, because I think it's really cool.
It's a long road, but I'll condense it down into a good time frame here. So
sure.
So again, my name's Aaron Wanserski. I work for the Center for Suicide Awareness. I've been there for about 2 years now. But prior to me working through the center, I was a police officer for a local department in our area for 12 years. I started my career in 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. I did a couple part-time gigs as a police officer. It's kind of your stepping stone to get into a much larger department, get some experience under your belt. And then I finally landed at a place where I was full-time. I worked there for 9 years. It was a wonderful 9 years. I learned so much as far as law enforcement and first responder, or being a first responder, and a lot of tools that are going to help me in the rest of my lifetime. But what I failed to realize was during that time, I wasn't necessarily taking care of myself. I would drink a lot. I would be very reckless when it came to things, and I wasn't sure why. I didn't know. I just assumed it's part of the job, and then life started to happen where I, wasn't single anymore. I found somebody I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and so we got married, and then life really did change. And I said, you're having a kid soon, and it just all of a sudden hit me where I'm being too reckless. I'm being too, there wasn't a right word to really put to it. But I wasn't focusing on me. And throughout my entire life, I thought it was just normal to always feel nervous about situations, always stay up, constantly thinking about the same things over and over and over. Well, God bless my wife. She realized that was a problem. She realized, and she said, we are going to have a really long road if you don't get some help. And it was the first time in my life where it hit me and said, wow, I actually maybe do need to go talk to somebody or figure something out, because I'm not happy. I'm not happy at all, even at work. So I went to talk with somebody, and I got diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and a sort of PTSD. And it was the first time in my life that I've ever heard of anxiety. It was really as a diagnosable thing. And it was a big shock to me. And at that point, in October of 2019, I made the decision to leave law enforcement, because ultimately, if I would have stayed, I would have killed myself. I say that in a very lighthearted tone right now, but I mean it with extreme weight. I would not be here if I was still in that job. That was right before COVID started. That was right before a lot of the social injustice movements started. And it would have taken my life. I know it would have, whether it would be by my hand or by a reckless choice. And I had to leave for my family. It was that simple. So I left, no idea what I was going to do, no idea where I was going. And I reconnected with our executive director at the center. Her name is Barb Bigalki. I had known her for pretty much my entire time span in law enforcement. And she had talked about an initiative that she wanted to start where it was more of the online culture, in not necessarily like a gaming, but just the online culture, and how there was such a need for mental health and suicide awareness. So I was intrigued, and I asked her about it, and I said, I'd love to volunteer in some way. I have some time on my hands right now. But she then said, let's go have coffee. Let's talk about this. So we kind of formulated this whole job where my official title for the center is I'm the video game outreach director. And when people hear that, they're like, well, you just play video games all day? Or it's a perk,
Sure.
but no, I don't play them all day. What I do is I actually help, like, people know Twitch, people know the streaming platforms with people that make a living doing this. But what they also fail to realize is that there's a much horrible pressure, and I know that was not the right wording, but there's an unseen pressure that these people have, where people are coming in and saying, I'm having a bad day, I don't think I want to be here anymore. And then all of a sudden, while they're being an entertainer, they have to switch to an quote unquote therapist, and it's very hard for them. So now what we do is we try to insert ourselves using the services that we provide, such as the Hope Line. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But, we provide those services saying, look, I know that this is your platform, but we're also here to back you as a streamer. We want to be your go-to network if this ever comes up. And to date, we have literally, people have done streams for us, and the Hope Line has been thrown around. It's been such a great positive reception, and really the sky's the limit at this point. So we're trying to make an impact in the online world as far as suicide awareness and mental health.
For sure. So we were talking a little bit before offline, but you mentioned mental health. Where you kind of got into this like right before COVID, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, we have a pandemic. Boom, let's drop it on you guys. But what are some of the things that you guys have seen as a result that you believe is increased maybe because of the pandemic?
COVID, plain and simple, really was the pandemic. But the secondary pandemic was mental health. It really was. And it wasn't realized until now, because when we started to come back into the world, like you were saying, James, like you had people that are starting to come back into your work and coming back into the culture. It's changed. So I use the example of the Hope Line because I should just explain what that is. That would just be a little easier. The Hope Line it's a 24/7 text-based emotional support service that we offer, completely free. It's confidential. So if somebody was struggling, not necessarily with suicide or with anxiety, maybe they're just having a bad day, maybe they just need to vent, maybe they need to calm down, text the word Hope Line to 741-741, and you're connected to a trained specialist that we have on staff, completely free, confidential, to talk about that issue and provide services as needed for maybe the major incidents. Like if there is somebody that might be actively suicidal, through our terms of service, we're able to locate where they're at, and we can provide, that type of service for an active rescue if need be. But for the most part, I would say 90% of the texts are, maybe, hey, my girlfriend broke up with me, I don't know what to do right now. Or, I'm struggling with, potentially transitioning to a man, I don't know what to do. It's for everything, and we're very okay with that. So with that, we've seen such a jump in people using the Hope Line, because all of a sudden, when everybody had to get sent home, nobody could go see a therapist anymore. So everybody had to transition to telehealth and to virtual health. And people weren't ready for that. Zoom was literally not known at that point until they came in at the right time, and they did it. But what we saw was there was an increase in just general nervousness and scaredness. And all of a sudden, we didn't know what to really do. How could we provide more services? So we had to really try to jump and do that. I think the one thing that COVID did was really show us that, it's nice to have that little quote unquote vacation at home. It was nice. Everybody was like, hey, I get to work from home. I can just go in my pajamas, for the first month or whatever. It was great. But then month turned into, what did they say initially? It was, we got to flatten the curve.
2 weeks.
Flatten the curve.
Yeah.
That's what it was initially. And then it was like, okay, well, 2 weeks is done. Well, we're going to stay home another month. All right, I'll bear it. It's fine. I can just spend some more time. And it's just going and going and going. And then everyone's like, we're 9 months into this, and I haven't been outside. And it plays this role of being social. It played that role of interacting with people. And that really can mess somebody up if you're not doing that.
I noticed that right off of the beginning, my wife and I with our two little ones. is in the early days of the pandemic, where we were, of course, reacting like everybody else, trying to consume what we could consume. Of course, the amount of consumption of media and material just adds to the anxiety, not necessarily helps it, but you're kind of at a loss for what else can you do. But I think the real big thing is I noticed, and both of my kids at the time, I now have a third, but both of my kids at the time regressed in potty training habits. They were not getting their social fix. They were scared of what was going on. They couldn't read body language as easily. They couldn't see people's lips moving because of masks, so they couldn't tell who was friend or foe. And literally, they just went from perfectly good kids to, oh my gosh, who are these kids? And their behavior suffered. And it was like the only variable was the pandemic, was the masks, was the social distancing, was the probably some of the fear and different anxiety coming through us as parents of the unknown. They were probably picking up on that through us, but we saw the immense amount of impact in a very short time period, and then saw the unwinding of that when we said, you know what, we can't force them into a box the same way that everyone else is telling us as adults. We need to treat them with the kid gloves. We're going to allow them to have that proximity. We're going to allow them to have those relationships, and we're going to, whenever possible, not put the masks on. And frankly, shortly after that, we pretty much didn't. And that's not really a conversation about COVID, but more that we saw the impact on our kids, and we chose that risk was worth it to sow into our kids' mental health.
You're 100% correct in that. I mean, it's one of those things where COVID was this, unknown thing, but now looking back on it, how one-sided have people become with it? It was, you're not wearing masks, you're not doing this, to, no, it's fine, you can do this. It turned into this thing that didn't need to happen. And then you're right, with the media consumption and with everything being thrown at you, everyone was scared. We didn't know what to do. You're right. I had a kid right before it happened. So it was December of 19, and I still have family members that have never met him. Like, to me, that's so unreal. But that's the one of those things. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you and I don't want it to get really political with, obviously that's not our point, but the reality is, it divided and created a chasm with family as well. Part of my family was like, we don't care. We just want to see you guys because we're afraid that, and there's the fear. We're afraid we're never going to see you again. And then the other part of my family was like, hey, don't come unless you're vaccinated, unless you're, and it was like, whoa, there's two huge polar opposites here. And navigating that took its toll. I mean, it took a toll on my wife and I, on our relationship, on our family's relationship, and that sort of thing. And so we see now, I mean, again, and again, coming out of that, we see just the results of that with, okay, how do we navigate those awkward conversations with family now?
Right. Family, colleagues, whatever.
Sure.
I mean, but we're seeing it at church. I mean, the 2 years was basically like putting society into a jar, shaking it up, and now we're letting it out. And the difference is that it's not going to just pour out nicely like it would have before the pandemic, because people are not the same. I mean, we know that trauma changes people. In a way, the last 2 years have been a prolonged trauma. And I think we're going to see the effects for years to come. But now we're encountering that on a daily basis. And I think it's changing in how we as church safety and security have to engage with people. We're always there to converse. We're always there to pray with them or support in a different way. I always try to say we try to help make ushers lethal and try to, when necessary. But it's all about the person. But we're seeing a different person coming back. We're seeing needs that are different. We're seeing pain that is different. And as a result, our approach and our recognition and response has to change as a result.
I think people have shied away from mental health for too long, and now it's inevitable that they can't. It really has become a pandemic in itself. And, for me to recognize my issues prior to COVID, that's a win for me, because at least I knew how to traverse through COVID,
Sure.
which had ups and downs. You're never going to be perfect when you recognize something, but
Right.
even like in the sense of, yeah, you talk about your first responders, or you talk about like your church safety group, you know, there's pressures that are not known how to deal with. And I think that's just something that we have to learn on the fly, because it was never ingrained in us to say mental health was this absolute physical illness. But it unfortunately is now becoming, or excuse me, it is fortunately becoming as on top or on tier as a physical illness.
Well, before the pandemic, essentially, I think we did a church security conference back. It would have been in I think it was 2017 or 2018, and I actually had a conversation with a pastor that came to that conference, and we were talking about mental health, and we were talking about, what can a church or what can a place of worship do to support their community and help work through that. And unfortunately, a lot of times churches and places of worship are reactive instead of proactive with what's going on in the community. But we had a great conversation, and we're like, yeah, the church really needs to be involved. We need to be better prepared so we can minister, so we can help our community and help these folks. And then all of a sudden, again, we just dropped a pandemic on everything, and it's like, okay, that didn't I'm being sarcastic. Yeah, that didn't exacerbate everything, 10 times, because now you have people that at the drop of the hat, after they've been cooped up and stayed in their home for 9 months now, or to a year now, you've got folks that have a hard time integrating back into community and society because they're deadly afraid that someone is going to get them ill or impact their family in a way that they can't control. And certainly, that adds, just like we said, that adds not being able to control. Like I can protect my family, but with my choices to an extent, but I can't protect my family from your choices all the time. And now coming back into it, it's almost pushed from a an impact place and position. It's almost pushed mental health as to the number one priority, I think, in churches and also in places of worship, because I can tell you, we regularly talk to places of worship that are seeing an increase in, how do we deal with this? Do we go down the road of de-escalation? Do we train everybody in de-escalation? But they're seeing those concerns and people coming in with those concerns far more often than we used to say. Like medical or security concerns were a big part of what a safety team would respond to. Right. And now it's not. It's, you kind of tiptoe around, because it's like, okay, I'm really worried that if I say something to this person that I don't know, in correction, in coaching and guidance, then what's going to happen? Like what's that outcome?
And it's funny you say that, and I don't mean like comically funny, but it's funny because you do hear that often about, even if your suspicion is arising, to say, is this person going through something? Is this something that maybe I should interject myself in? My first opinion and my first thought process and my first, I guess you could say, educational experience with this is to interject yourself and ask, look, I've recognized this. Are you having a bad day, or is this something you want to talk about? Because most people aren't just going to say, I have a mental illness, I'm dealing with something. I think it takes a lot of courage to be able to say, look, I'm depressed. I have a lot of stuff I'm dealing with. But when they get to that point, it's comfortable to talk about. But for a regular person that maybe, they still see this mental illness as a stigma.
Well, our society, like, in that stigma, our society has never embraced that until now. I mean, even in the first responder realm, when I was in public safety with fire, EMS, and law enforcement, I did a short stint with law enforcement. But that was 20. When I think about it, I'm showing my age. That was 20 years ago. But the thing is, whenever there was a traumatic incident, and I could name several that I went to, In a public safety, fire EMS standpoint, it was never, hey, let's talk about this. Let's address mental health. It was walk it off, right? The whole
Yes.
attitude was, if you can't handle this, then this is not your field. You should not
Yeah.
be doing this.
Yep.
And the reality is, we're not necessarily seeing the extent and the level of PTSD and that sort of thing with church security yet. But as the church as a whole responds to different incidents that come in and impact, and the folks that are part of the safety and security team are responsible and are responding, in a sense, we're starting to see mental health things that they deal with. And that can still be taxing on an individual that's volunteering all the time,
Right.
and when you get in a situation where almost every Sunday you're serving, and this is for the folks listening for sure, you can get beat down, you can get exhausted, and because you're volunteering all the time. And the bad thing of that is, when you get beat down mentally, your tolerance, your level to handle what could have been a simple thing is no longer, it's not a simple thing anymore.
Exactly.
And for myself, there have been times where I've had to step back, or I've had, thankfully, people grab me and pull me back and say, you know what, you need to take a break, because you're saying and you're responding and you're doing stuff that it's not necessarily bad, but I know it's not you, like, because you're angry, or this is coming out, or that sort of thing. So really, from a leadership perspective and looking at your team, it's really all of our responsibilities to watch those that are volunteering and serving, and say, you know what, okay, maybe this person needs to take a break, because them serving or volunteering isn't necessarily more important than them maintaining a solid mental health. And and making that decision and choice, like you said earlier with your career, to say, you know what, I don't like where this is going. I don't like who I am and what I'm doing right now. So, I have to step back, and I have to look at how that's impacting me, and how, that impacts everyone around, around me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we actually, we're at the 30-minute mark, so we need to take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll definitely jump back into that topic, and how we can address that as a church and community. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates, your partner in service.
When you let Checker take care of background checks, you get more time to focus on your ministry. Over 8,000 churches and faith-based communities across the United States use Checker. Checker lets you quickly and easily screen new volunteers, so you'll spend less time on paperwork and administrative tasks. Our fast, accurate background checks reduce turnaround time per applicant by 72% on average. Checker partners with church management systems, including Taillight, Planning Center, Rock RMS, PushPay, and Full Method, so it's easy to integrate into systems you're already using. Trust Checker for faster, easier, more reliable background checks, so you can focus on what brings you all together. To learn more, visit www.checkr.com/church.
We all deal with stress on a daily basis. When not properly managed, we can face burnout, mental, physical, and spiritual burnout. It can be detrimental to serving in church safety and security, as well as other ministries, and affect all areas of life. Coming Back brings biblical guidance for such a dilemma. In the book Coming Back, best-selling author James McGarvey takes a biblical-based approach to address and prevent ministry burnout. As As you read Coming Back, you will easily relate to James's shared experiences, be inspired by Scripture, and grow through the practical and applicable instruction found in this much-needed book. This encouraging read will affect you and your team in a positive way to continue the path of ministry with an energized and encouraged spirit. Through biblical and practical knowledge and experience, James shows that it is all about coming back to focus on what matters, coming back to the cross.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
Okay, and we are back. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can visit churchsafetyguys.com for some great resources for your church. And if you have the opportunity, click the like and subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. So we're talking with Aaron from the Center of Suicide Awareness, and he graciously joined us today. We're talking about mental health in the community and how the church and place of worship can impact that in a positive way. I'll jump right back in and throw it over to you, Mike, because I know you have some notes.
Yeah, wanted to go. I mean, realistically, we hinted at it a little bit, and I think you covered a couple of the points that I was going to hit there, James. But I think in general is there isn't really another ministry in the church, like a regular ministry that you see pretty frequently, that has the exposure to mental health like Church Safety and Security does, for two reasons. Really, because A, we have that encountering of folks that may be having a bad day, maybe all the way as far as being in crisis itself. But we also have the ability that says, okay, as folks that may be responding to incidents on a different scale, of course, than those that are doing it day in and day out as sworn officers or EMS or fire. But when we're acting as immediate responders in a church setting, there's that exposure to what's happening. So it's kind of, in effect, the job can have a mental health tax, where it's an added pressure on the individuals on our teams. And while it's a low likelihood of having that exposure to supercritical incidents, we can have that continued stress, or even the stressors from the heightened awareness that can drive into things like exhaustion, the depression, the PTSD, the anxiety that can be happening, because in a way you're suffering from different things but not necessarily recognizing it. When you dial that up so heavily because you know what, you're concerned about a DLR or whatever, and I know it doesn't look right for those that don't know the acronym, but I mean, and we know some people don't like that acronym, but the reality is the first point is something doesn't look right, something doesn't feel right, something doesn't sound right. Now, what else can we figure out beyond that? What's going on here? So there's the other angle, though, however, that we haven't touched yet, which is there may be folks on our teams that are putting so much eggs in this basket. So many of their spoons are tied up in being members of their safety team that their identity, their human worth, their purpose is too overwrapped into being as part of this team. So they may be suffering with overcommitment. They may be addicted in some ways to serving. And it's hard to recognize that, but we have to as leaders kind of look at it and say, is everybody serving on my team in the right mind to be serving? So whether it's taking a break or not, we need to make sure we're looking at it through those angles as well.
I think you hit it spot on, Mike. Over serving, that is one of those things that when let's just go back to, and I'm glad you did the differentiating between, a first responder and maybe a church security, because there is vastly different things, but you're ideally doing the same things. You're looking to make things that are safe, be that first responder or be that person that is going to help a situation become normalized.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things was that I was so committed to constantly the job. That was my identity. I didn't have anything else. I wasn't Aaron. I was Aaron, the police officer, and that's, or like, you could be like Mike, the security guy for blah, 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 or Mike, the office, it could be anything. But when you dedicate yourself so much to that, you kind of lose yourself in thinking, this is all I have, this is all I want. And you start neglecting those other things, family, friends, kids, whatever really is the core value that you need to completely keep yourself full. And it's so hard to do, because if you don't recognize it, have you ever heard of the Taillight Effect before?
I'm not sure.
Taillight Effect is one of those really cool things that we came up with, but it's if as an officer, if you're pulling somebody over and you go up to the car and you say, "Hey, pulled you over because your taillight's out," what's the person who's says, "Oh, I didn't even know. I don't ever look at it." Whatever. We can apply that specifically to an issue maybe we're dealing with. Maybe I'm over inserting myself into something. Hey, I'm not seeing it because I'm focused on dedicating it to this thing. But James sees it and says, "Hey, Aaron, are you doing okay? Like, is everything good?" It's checking in on each other. And I think there's this other avenue of stigma where I can't approach you, James, and say, "Hey, James, I've noticed that you're really going 100%. And I'm so happy you are. But are you doing okay? Because it's a lot, man. I understand that you're doing this, but I just want to make sure I'm checking in on you."
It's accountability in a sense. And, with one of the things that I've noticed, especially with church safety teams, is there is a brotherhood, there is a unique bond, and you want that bond because there are cases when I know there are things that I've responded to as almost to the level of first responder. We worry about active shooters, we worry about people having medical emergencies, that sort of thing. But there are things that I've responded to where I know that there are individuals responding with me that have my back, right? So you develop that bond, that brotherhood of being able to trust and depend on that individual. And that's great. That's from a community standpoint, that's awesome. But at the same time, if you don't, and that's where from a spiritual aspect of discipleship and mentoring and engagement, that's where that comes in, because as leaders we have the opportunity to pour into somebody else's life and contribute to them. But realistically looking at it, you're absolutely right, Aaron, because if I can't, as a leader or as someone volunteering, if I don't have the ability to step in and say, you know what, we need to evaluate how you're doing mentally and how you can handle this, then it is what it is. It's that's almost like a detriment, because at that point you're saying, okay, you know what, I'm concerned about you as an individual, but I'm not concerned enough to say you need to take a break, or how are you doing mentally or physically. So Mike, I know you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of say, what beyond that is kind of hit on resilience, is that we have to try to sew into our teams some resilience and the ability to cope with what they're experiencing, and understand that, not everybody's wired the same. Not everybody is going to be encountering the same thing the first time. Their exposure to something may be the first time they've ever been exposed to that. Therefore, their behavior, their reaction, their ability to cope with that, their after action, if you will, for that person is going to be different. So part of our ministry life cycle is, you hit on it, James, is to engage your team and disciple them. But another one is renew. And that's really that important area. And I think in renewal is we need to be promoting self-care with our teams, where are you getting adequate sleep? Are you having balanced nutrition? Are you getting regular exercise? That was a huge gap during certainly COVID. We talked about before the break that people weren't getting outside. They weren't doing things. all of that had a toll on their mental health. But again, we've talked about taking time off, things like that. And we really have to resilience, but also there's another word out there that I think is important, is mindfulness. How can we make sure that we're really kind of present in the moment with our teams, and that we're really talking about how to be resilient, how to practice mindfulness, and how to use things like empathy with our team members?
I love that you talk about resilience. I think that that's one of the biggest things. And I know we were talking prior to this, but talk about resilience as just bouncing back. It's a lot more than that. I mean, we talk about, there's such a thing as PTSD. We are aware of that. Everyone knows that that's existing. But there's also a thing called post-traumatic growth. So you might be able to go through an incident where it's that horrible. It might be something that's going to affect you. How do you grow from something like that, as opposed to falling into a trap and maybe
I think we lost you there for Aaron for a second.
There we go. Am I back?
Yep.
You're back.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
But there is that such a thing. You don't fall into a negative trap all the time. You can learn how to come about from an incident that maybe is traumatic, but instead of using negative coping skills, finding those things that you can rely on. So I love the fact that we talk about resilience, because it does play a role into everything. It really does.
Well, and that's, we've talked about it before, but doing team activities and being able to get outside of, we've talked about, like at my church, a lot of times we'll go out and we'll do a hobby together. We'll take a break, we'll do a picnic, we'll go, go shooting together, or, some of the guys will get together and go fishing, or do something fun that's relaxing, that's bonding, but also outside of the church. And it's not because we hate doing things for the church, but like Mike said at the beginning of the broadcast, it is one ministry component to most churches that honestly, it's I don't know how many times I've said this, but you're the first to get there and the last to leave. So oftentimes, the investment that's required, we contribute, we give without thinking about the ramifications of, what that cost is. Like everything, when you think about it, even from a mental standpoint, everything has a cost and a return of investment, right? So, what is the cost that I have to sacrifice? And I think younger generations, perhaps understand that concept a little bit better than maybe some of, some of our older folks. But then we've also, we've changed our culture from the standpoint of, my folks, if the church doors were open, it doesn't matter what it was, they were there, and, they were dragging me along. But, we also, that's part of understanding that every generation is different, and how people serve and how people are engaged and involved now looks different than it was, even 5 or 10 years ago. So, if you have a mixed team with different ages and different generations on it, I mean, we covered that a little bit in the Inspire, Influence, and Impact book when we talk about the ministry life cycle. But, the reality of that is that if you've got a mixed age team, you're going to have to be creative with how to help each age group and each person in that team, because otherwise people will be, will have opportunities and be challenged in ways that you're not expecting, or you can get, easily sideswiped by that. So
I think the idea of church safety needs to be expanded, and we need to look at it as saying we're looking at the safety of our team as well, not just physically, but mentally, so that we're taking that responsibility as leaders to say, all right, am I getting enough rest as leader? Are my team members getting enough rest? Are they eating well? Are they dealing with anything outside of this? There's a point with being able to serve well in ministry. And I think when somebody's hurting, their ability to help goes down. It's diminished. So you want to be able to sow into them at the right way. And that brings up a good point that I want to raise, is that there's kind of an acronym that I've used when I encounter somebody that, you know what, there's questionable behavior. It's not necessarily risky, it's just off. And so you want to obviously assess and determine, you're engaging, you're conversing. But for me, it's serving is about bringing help. And so the acronym is HELP. So if I think there's something questionable there, I want to provide hope. I want to bring empathy. I want to make sure I'm listening more than I'm talking, and I want to make sure that I'm staying positive. And those right there are ways that I think our good friend John would talk about from a de-escalation standpoint, that would be helpful. But those are even keel ways where I could say, hey, I just want to be helpful here, so I'm going to follow that as in my engagement while I'm assessing, so that I can further decide, okay, what else is needed here? Are we going to start to go out too far over my skis, and I need to, call others in, because this, this may be getting, okay, we need to get somebody rolling because this is a physical threat to himself or to others. Okay, or maybe we need to bring over a pastor and there needs to be further engagement, and it's not just me. Or maybe I'm striking out. Maybe I'm not connecting with this person for whatever reason. We need to tap out and bring somebody in so that we don't lose them.
Absolutely. I always say, you trust your gut. Plain and simple. I mean, you said it exactly. There are certain things that people give off are red flags, maybe to one person, but might not to another. And I think it's all comes down to trusting your gut. If you feel like something's there, give what resources you can to the extent that you're able to. Sure. But just ultimately, it comes down to just be kind to people. Just be kind. Just if somebody's going through something, ask them. Be there for them. And also within your teams, check into each other, because if you don't have a well-rounded team, it's all about how you show up. If you show up angry, upset, that's going to resonate through the rest. Yes, exactly. So I think it's always just trust your gut, be kind, check in on one another.
And it's funny you mentioned that. We had a gentleman that came in actually to our church last week that is a unique individual, and he's a little quirky, but there's a lot of quirky people at churches, right? So so anyhow, he came in and he's been struggling with some issues with cancer, and he made the comment last week, well, I guess he's on some medication that is really strong medication for that cancer. And he made the statement to one of our safety folks, well, I should just shoot myself and be done with this. And it wasn't that he said that, it was that he was very sincere with saying it. It was sincere enough that we were like, okay, this is a concern, because now you're in a church, where's your mental status with this? Like, are you just saying that? Or, because again, that's not something that you throw around and just randomly say. And so we actually, we pulled him out after the service, and we actually grabbed a pastor and we sat down with him and we were like, hey, we're happy to pray with you. We're happy to talk about this. How can we help? And how can we get you some help? Because, that's not normal. Like, it's not normal to say stuff like that. And so from our aspect, from a safety team, are we trained counselors or professionals? Some of us have more training than others, but looking for that sort of thing. If you have a unique situation, you need to, like Aaron mentioned before, you need to be able to distinguish what's normal and what's not normal, and be able to say, okay, we need to bring in some extra help on this, for sure.
Yeah. And that's an important topic out there that I think for all of us, it's worth looking into. This is an area I need to explore more, because, I am not an expert here, but I've tried to consume and learn and surround myself with folks like Aaron and others where I can learn more about how to engage with folks from this standpoint. I've connected with folks at my local police department that their team and how they deal with responding to people that are in crisis. But there's a topic out there that's worth searching for. It's called mental health first aid. And it's actually the response and how to really kind of learn about this more, in how do we practice that immediate response aid to somebody that's having a mental health episode of some sort.
Yeah, and I know we're wrapping up here, and thankfully, when I was going through my time in law enforcement, I got to do something called crisis training intervention, or CIT, or crisis intervention training, excuse me. And so it taught me a lot on how to deal with that. But I feel like a lot of it comes down to just really being, if you're talking about yourself, learning about it, being vulnerable, finding a way that makes you feel comfortable talking about it, because there's still a stigma when it comes to mental health. And thankfully, I can be an advocate and say, look, mental health is very normal to have. It's a very normal thing that people are so scared to talk about. And I really, really don't understand why, because I deal with it every day. I talk to people who deal with it every day. And what's the statistic? 1 in 3 or 4 people around you have some sort of a diagnosable mental illness that maybe isn't diagnosed. That's probably a lot higher now. And I think we have to start talking about it to normalize it a lot more.
For sure. So anyhow, unfortunately we're kind of out of time. And it's definitely something that we could continue to talk about. So we really, as always, Aaron, we love that you were available to come on. Really appreciate your time. And if you would, what is the hope number again that you mentioned earlier? So we can put that
absolutely.
out there.
So the Center for Suicide Awareness created what again is called the Hope Line. Text-based emotional support service. All you would have to do is text the word Hope Line to 741-741, and you'll be connected to one of our trained specialists. Completely free, confidential, to talk about whatever issue you might be facing. It can range from, like I said, a suicidal ideation to I'm having a bad day, I'm having financial issues. It's something immediate as opposed to having to set up with a therapist. Guess what? You're waiting 3 weeks for that. This is something immediate. It's these trained people behind the phone that are talking to you real-time live.
Awesome.
That's great.
And we'll put that on our website as well. So I will actually work on that this week. So if you need to use it or need to reach out to Aaron and his team, please feel free to do that. As always, thanks for joining us tonight and on this broadcast. If you're listening at a later time, you can visit us at churchsafetyguys.com for some great church security resources, or download our app at churchsecurityapp.com. And take a look at, when you get onto the Church Safety Guys page, take a look at the conferences and everything coming up. We've got actually in 2 weeks, I'll be up in Grand Rapids with Grand Rapids PD doing an outreach program with them. And we're going to be talking with some mosques, some synagogues, and some churches about church security and what they can do for their community. So there's more information on that event on the website. So you're welcome to join us. And then if you're listening more broad than the Midwest, May 14th, we've got our Church Security Essentials Conference coming up in Orlando, Florida this year. And there's information on our website to join us if you're so inclined. We've got some awesome key speakers coming up. Mike's going to speak. That's pretty awesome.
I don't know about that, but it'll be good.
No, we've got a crazy lineup of some great folks, and really looking forward to that. So anyhow, if we can be of any service to you, please feel free to reach out, and we will talk to you again next time. So take care. God bless. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.